Welcome everybody back into NerdSesh. As always, I'm Carson Brever, and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we got the double flu game pod for you guys. I'm sick, Logan's sicker, and we've got a lot to cover, so we couldn't take the day off. We have to play through, we have to persevere. We're going to be talking a lot of draft stuff later in the show, but we're going to start with a couple of big news stories that dropped yesterday in the NBA. The first one being, Logan, that the Los Angeles Lakers have ended their seemingly interminable coaching search, and they have hired JJ Redick to take on that job. Known podcaster JJ Redick. What's your reaction to this move, Logan?
Yeah, I'm not super surprised, Carson. I think that this was always how it was going to go with the reporting. For some time now, it seemed like Redick was going to be the head coach, and especially after the Dan Hurley contract fell through. Redick, I like the supporting cast that he's bringing on and assistant coaches. He's bringing on Scott Brooks, Rajon Rondo, Jared Dudley, and Sam Cassell as assistant coaches. And I just have two big concerns with Redick as head coach of the Lakers. One, stating the obvious, he's a first-time head coach. I just wonder about little details. And this isn't about Redick's basketball acumen, right? I trust JJ Redick with all the X's and O's. He is a brilliant basketball mind. Schematically, I trust him to build things up. It's more about management of games. And again, this is not a criticism of JJ Redick as a head coach. This is kind of just a baseline of any first-time head coach, right? Taking smart timeouts, little in-game adjustments and stuff like that, and management of games. It's just hard, right? Going from not being on the sideline to immediately thrust into being on the sideline. All of those issues that just come with being a first-timer. But the bigger issue I have is how intertwined LeBron is with the LA management. And I've said this for a long time now. If you've been a long-time listener of the pod, it feels like LeBron James is the Jackie Moon of the Los Angeles Lakers, where it feels like he owns the team, he is the general manager of the team, and he plays for the team. At this point, Carson, I'm just waiting for him to drop "Love Me Sexy" at some point. And
God, I would love that. Oh, man.
We can just tie the knot, man. He can officially go into his Jackie Moon era. It feels like LeBron is just playing all of these different roles, and that's where I really worry about this hire, right? The power dynamic of it all, right? Are people really going to look to JJ in critical moments? Are people going to listen to him? Are they going to defer to LeBron, right? Is LeBron a de facto player and assistant coach now? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but again, I just worry about the dynamics of it. It's really uncharacteristic, and it's really something that we haven't seen before. Outside of, ironically, MJ with the Wizards when he's part owner and player too, right? But that's where I really wonder about this. And it is hard, right, with LeBron. With a player like LeBron, with his status, you have to find somebody that he's going to sign off and listen to as a head coach. So you kind of have to play by his demands. It's going to be hard to find someone that he really respects and really trusts. And so it's not an easy job to walk into. It's not an easy, just find a guy to help out with. But that's my biggest concern that I've harped on throughout. It's just the power dynamic of all this. It's not something usually that you see in the league. It's normally general manager does general manager things. Head coach does head coach things. Players do players things. And I just worry about the blurred lines between the coaching hierarchy and the players. And I just wonder where JJ Redick's leash ends and where LeBron's leash starts as head coach. And that's my big fundamental concern with JJ coming in as head coach. It really has nothing to do with his basketball acumen or his IQ or anything like that. It's really about the power dynamics of this all.
It's a fascinating dynamic, and it's a really interesting hire. And I think that you hit on it, but the pros with the JJ hire to me are that he is a really smart guy. I absolutely trust him as a basketball mind, and I think that he can inject a bit of offensive creativity here. A lot of their offensive approach, to me, and identity is going to be dictated by LeBron. But nevertheless, there's opportunities, right, for drawing up creative ATOs and specific sets that JJ could bring some value through that. Also, when you think about one of the major issues that you had with Darvin Ham last year, it was just the struggles identifying who should be on the floor, rotational decisions that didn't make sense, the starting lineup where you had Cam Reddish and Vando in the backcourt starting, and then you had Austin Reeves and D'Lo both coming off the bench, just stuff like that that really, really made you question his basketball IQ. You're not going to have that with JJ. And he has a great relationship with LeBron, of course, who clearly wanted him. And that does matter. Unequivocally, that is a serious plus. Also, like you say, I really like the staff that he's bringing in. And when you talk about some of those concerns about experience and authority, bringing in longtime NBA coaches like Scotty Brooks, who's been a head coach multiple times, like Sam Cassell, who has been one of the most successful assistant coaches in the league for the last decade, there's authority there. Rajon Rondo is just a really smart basketball mind. So I do think that they took the right approach in building out this staff around him. But there's also, to me, some clear cons to this hire. Number one being experience. And that's interrelated with the hierarchy dynamic that you're talking about. But it is also different. And although I think JJ is really smart, it takes an exceptional individual to be able to take the leap from not having coached high-level basketball at all, no matter how smart a player you were, to coaching an NBA team that has the expectations to contend, fair or not, given the talent of their roster, that plays in Los Angeles for arguably the greatest franchise in league history with maybe the largest fan base, that has LeBron James, maybe the greatest player ever on his team. Like, that is a crazy tough situation to be walking into when you have never done this at any sort of high level before. And there have been a number of these disastrous successful players who haven't had that coaching experience stepping in as a head coach. We saw it with Steve Nash in the Nets. That was a disaster. We saw it with Derek Fisher with the Knicks, where that was not a talented basketball team, but they were awful under him, and we only heard terrible things about him. Isaiah Thomas was brutal as a head coach. And even if you look at, for example, a Jason Kidd, who now has figured it out and has turned himself into a pretty good NBA head coach, his first stint with the Nets was really rough. Like, there's just a learning curve to this, as there is to any job, but this is a really hard job. And the one example that I've seen people point to and say, oh, you can't just immediately step in and find success. What about Steve Kerr? To me, that is so different for a number of reasons. Maybe the largest one being that when Steve Kerr took over, he wasn't just a 5-time NBA champion who had played for multiple years with Michael Jordan and played under Phil Jackson. There is just credibility that comes with that sort of proximity to greatness. He'd also been a GM for some really good Suns teams, so that's experience within the league, evaluating personnel, making front office decisions. But he was also 49 years old. Steph Curry was 26. Clay and Draymond were 24. And although the Warriors were very talented and up and coming, like, they hadn't really won anything yet. And here was one of the most proven winners in the history of the sport, who obviously had something to offer to them in terms of building a culture, who had that sort of winning wisdom. And they were very open to that. LeBron and JJ are both 39 years old. LeBron played a significant majority of his NBA career with JJ Redick out there, and he was way better than JJ Redick. They were just co-hosting a podcast in which it was like, oh my God, LeBron's doing a podcast? JJ's super smart, but who do you think was more excited to be in the room with the other guy? It was JJ with LeBron. And so that's a really unique dynamic, because I do think that you're always going to have those questions of, why would LeBron defer to anybody? Why would LeBron defer to Frank Vogel? He's every bit as smart and obviously way more proven in terms of his basketball career. He's way smarter than a Darvin Ham, right? But that dynamic is now muddier than ever when it is your friend, your peer, and a guy who you've played against for so long. That's a really interesting and unique dynamic, and it is a bit concerning to me. So it's going to be a challenge. And if you look at the major issues that Lakers fans and the Lakers had with Darvin Ham last year, I mentioned personnel management. I mentioned just establishing a basketball identity, right? Not really injecting any sort of creativity on either side of the ball. But the biggest thing probably that hurt the Lakers throughout the regular season was just a complete lack of effort, right? Taking off stretches of the season, that abysmal stretch that they had after the in-season tournament. And so I look to culture setting as a key that you want from any candidate for this job. And that's where I'm very skeptical about JJ, just because it's like he can't approach this with the perspective of, okay, I can tell LeBron what to do. I'm a position of authority to him. Of course he isn't. Is he that to AD? Probably not. And that would be a challenge for anybody. But if you've coached for a decade in the league, like, at least you have more authority in that position. And that's not to say that there was a perfect hire to solve this problem. I want to be clear. I don't think James Borrego is solving this problem. Like, I don't think that there was a great selection of coaches out there available for hire. Dan Hurley could have been a great culture setter if they would allow him to do his thing. LeBron has to buy into that. And I think if LeBron wanted to play hard over an 82-game season, he probably wouldn't need anybody to tell him to do that. He'd just choose to do it. So that's where I'm very interested in this, but I don't really think it matters all that much. I do think there are little areas in which JJ can help this basketball team improve. I also do worry just about how he is going to deal with some of these game management and flow things. Like, how is he going to deal with managing the personalities of a team of grown men for the first time? Those are real challenges, and we can't pretend that they aren't and that it's the most intuitive thing ever, because it's not. So he's a great communicator. I don't doubt that, but I do still worry about the lack of experience on some of those fronts. So if I were to guess how this ends up, I would say probably after a couple years, the Lakers haven't achieved to the expectations of their fan base. I would say they've probably been a good basketball team, not a great one, and a significant portion of the blame is going to fall on JJ Redick for that. And that is where, again, I'm not sure that that would be different with any other coach out there. I'm not sure that that's a JJ thing. I think there is clear opportunity for JJ to be an awesome coach in this league because he's smart, because he's competitive, because he's a really good communicator. And I think that he'll just continue to build a reputation, and then over the years will accrue that respect that any great head coach really needs. But the Lakers just have roster limitations at the end of the day. We saw it with obviously the really inconsistent play of D'Lo. We see it with the defensive limitations of their backcourt. We saw it with just the overall underperformance of their role players. Everybody wants to point at Darvin Ham and say that guy sucks, he's the problem. And Darvin Ham was a bad basketball coach, but he's not the reason that the Lakers lost to the Nuggets. And JJ Redick isn't going to magically cure the fact that the Lakers aren't as talented as the Nuggets. They aren't as talented as the Thunder. They aren't as talented as the Timberwolves right now. But again, Lakers fans can't seem to come to terms with that. And so I think that this probably ends ugly. And I think that JJ, although I am optimistic about his long-term coaching potential, would have to be really, really exceptional to succeed in these circumstances.
I completely agree. And what's next, man? LeBron supersedes him as head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers after he retires.
Player coach.
I think you hit on the big key there, man, about the locker room dynamics. And, you know, are players just going to respect JJ? And again, I don't mean that as like is a disrespectful way to JJ Redick. It's just a reality of the situation, right? Or like, guys going to listen to him. Is he going to be able to also hold these guys accountable when they need to be, right? And are guys going to be receptive to that? I don't know, man. Again, like you said, dude, it's a lot easier when there's an established culture with somebody, with a team, where you can just step in and do your job. That's not there. And also the other unfortunate reality of this job, too, and this is stating the obvious, but you're in Los Angeles. He's going to be under a microscope with every single thing he does, man. And that's what compounds and make this job so much harder. Mm-hmm. What's sad, too, man, is why I always thought this was kind of a lose-lose gig for anybody stepping into this. Let's go best case scenario with the Lakers, right? Say the Lakers overachieve. Say they absolutely crush this offseason. They get all the assets they need. They build up a contending roster. They hit home runs. Say they make a conference finals run. Guess what, man? Redick's not even going to get credit for that, dude. I feel like LeBron's going to get all the credit regardless. But if the Lakers crap their pants and they don't make the playoffs or they get bounced in the first round, guess who receives all the brunt of it? It's going to be JJ. I just don't think it's a tough gig, man. It's a really tough gig for whoever's stepping into it. I'm optimistic that JJ is going to crush the X's and O's and the schemes, and I think he's going to make this half-court offense move a lot better. But there's a lot more to coaching than schematics. And like you said, man, I think the Lakers are really going to have to crush this offseason. I think it's way more important that they get the roster right than the hire, right? I think the hire is very important, but I think the roster moves are way more important to the Lakers' success than any coach they would have hired.
And in many ways, I think that the LeBron JJ dynamic is just going to set the tone for how this team embraces him as head coach, because we can talk about, there are other guys who are older and whatnot, and so you just don't have that dynamic of being literal peers, of knowing that, like, there's no reason for JJ to have a position of authority over you. But at the same time, like, LeBron really likes JJ. He clearly really respects JJ and his basketball opinion on an individual level. And so maybe it being this collaborative thing isn't the worst outcome compared to LeBron just being like, well, I don't respect this guy's basketball opinion. I don't like what this guy is saying. I would rather he not be necessarily deferring, but have an understanding of, okay, let's talk about this, and I am going to take some of your input in, and we can come to sort of a collective solution and a collective approach that could end up being the best for the basketball team. As much as anything, dude, it's just the pressure cooker that is being the Lakers head coach, man. Think about how it ended for Vogel. Things turned on a dime quickly there. Think about how it ended for Darvin Ham. Again, not to say that either of those guys deserve to keep their jobs, but that leash is crazy short. And that's one final thing. JJ is in many ways a young man. I mean, he was just an NBA player, and he's very online. This is a podcaster we're talking about. I just don't think he can be in the Twitter replies, man. Like, no NBA head coach does that. You just can't let any of the outside noise in, and I do think that he understands that, but he is one of those guys, like a lot of prominent media figures, they don't respond to any negative comments. They just don't care. JJ is one of those guys who does, and that is something that he unequivocally cannot do in this job. Just not worth the mess that comes with that whatsoever.
Dude, I think you hit on the positive side, though, looking at this through a positive lens. Like, LeBron, Redick, and Rondo is a special collective of
Very
just
smart
MFs. Like, it's going to take a lot of work and I think a lot of commitment from everybody. But they could, man. Those are three brilliant basketball minds. Like, if this goes right, though, I can't see the Lakers being more prepared. I think the biggest thing is, like, LeBron buying in. And I think if LeBron falls and shows the rest of the team that, like, they're going to make this commitment to JJ and making this thing work, I think everybody else will fall in line. But I think it starts with LeBron making that commitment that, hey, this is our guy. We're going to listen to him. We're going to do what he says. And I think that if LeBron goes, I think the entire team will go with him.
And expectations are key in all of this, because I just don't think there's a world in which LeBron is playing hard consistently over the course of an 82-game season. It's just not reasonable. He shouldn't have to do that. He's 39 years old. He hasn't been doing that for several years, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's where the expectations come into play, because if the Lakers were to want to win a title, not only would they have to have more talent, they would have to commit and say, we're going to try to be a 55-win team, because that matters, right? The path that they could have faced, were they not having to get through the play-in and face the Denver Nuggets in the first round, like, that does significantly change your potential playoff outcomes. I don't see that happening. I really like JJ. I think that he can be a really good head coach. I just think this is a really, really hard job unless people can come to terms with the idea that just because LeBron is on the team and AD is on the team doesn't mean they have to win the title, doesn't mean they have to be in that conversation. Part of appreciating this late stage of LeBron's career should just be like, holy shit, how is he still a top 10 player? Holy shit, how are they still winning 45 to 50 games with him as their best guy? Like, that's still fun. That's still good. That's still valuable as a basketball team, in my opinion. And that is what you should be expecting. Okay, that's story number one from yesterday, Logan. The other big story of the day involves the Chicago Bulls trading Alex Caruso, who we all know has been one of the most prized winning assets that contenders have wanted to trade for. Like, he was the talk of the deadline. And who do they go all in for with him, Logan? They trade him to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Josh Giddey. What is your reaction to this?
Classic Chicago Bulls. Classic Chicago Bulls, man. I mean, they've been staving off a inevitable rebuild for, 3 years now, with not dealing away DeRozan, not dealing away Levine, not dealing away Vucevic. Like, I don't know, man. And then they pivot off like a winning basketball player. And traditionally, right, when you're pivoting off a really good basketball player, you'd like to punt and get future assets potentially, right? So when you stink, you have assets that you can rebuild with and maybe draft some young players and build around them. Or, I don't know, this is a good idea, Carson. How about if we trade this really good asset? How about we get a complementary piece to some of the young assets we have? So, right, our two most prized young assets are Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu, two really good guards that are really good with the ball in their hands. So how about let's trade for a guy who can't really do anything with the ball out of his hands? He can't shoot. I mean, dude, that's just like the crux of this for me, man. Your two best young players are Kobe and Ayo. These should be the guys, in my opinion. If I was the Bulls GM, I would be building around and structuring my rebuild around. So I'd either want to go out and get a center, a front court player, right? Or I'm going to go and get some picks down the line, which reportedly the Bulls turned down an offer of 2 first-round picks, which I think is a home run for Alex Caruso. Caruso's a great player. But you're not contending right now, and for his sake and for your sake, it's in the best interest of both parties to move off of one another. The Bulls get some assets for the future in their rebuild. The other team gets a contending asset. I just don't know what the Bulls see in Giddey, man. Giddey can grab a rebound. He can sure pass that ball, but he can't score. And again, man, your two youngest assets are guys that are good with the ball in their hands. They complement each other really well. And so they have now got another asset at a position that they already have young talent with that doesn't really complement those guys. I don't know, man. This is just a classic Chicago Bulls front office move, dude. The Chicago Bulls have been an absolute shambles ever since Derrick Rose went down, man, and they can't get their head out of their ass.
Yeah.
I think this is a really poor move, and I think it is really foolish that they turned down an offer of 2 first-round picks, man. That's a great deal to me. It's just a classic Chicago Bulls move. What else do you expect? Look, if Giddey figures his shot out, this will look like a home run, but I'm just not confident in him figuring that out. And he has other physical limitations, man. Like, he's never going to create really great downhill pressure. He's not ever going to be a great isolation scorer. If he figures his shot out, I think he can be a good player. But even that, to me, is a long shot. So, yeah. This is a great move for Oklahoma City, though. On the flip side of this, I think this is a home run for Oklahoma City. I think they flee Chicago.
Agreed. I do wonder if there's something in the water with the Chicago's front office, just because, like, for years and years, it was Gar Pax, right? It was Gar Forman and John Paxson. These guys were the problem. These guys keep making terrible decisions. And to be fair, they did. And then you fire them. And now the Carcinovas era has not been any better. And I understood the process between trying to put together the DeRozan, Levine, Lonzo, Vooch core. You were never going to contend. But if Lonzo had stayed healthy, could you have been a 50-win team for a couple years? Sure. But the length for which they have held on to some sort of vision of being even a good basketball team around those guys is just inexcusable, because Lonzo can't get on the basketball court and hasn't been able to for years at this point. And the limitations of all these other guys are very obvious, and their value is just continuing to diminish. And they've been shopping Levine, but the notion that they would want to re-sign DeRozan, it's just, to me, completely incapable team building. And this is completely incapable asset management, because regardless of what you think of Josh Giddey, you're talking about turning down 2 firsts. You're talking about turning down a top 10 pick in this year's draft. Those are 2 separate deals that the Bulls reportedly turned down. That, to me, is just shocking, because it's not that Josh Giddey is completely without positive traits as a basketball player. Like his feel as a passer, his variety as a passer, what he can do, varying pace from different angles at his size, his creativity. They're like, he's an awesome passer of the basketball. But basically everything else he is going to struggle with offensively, and he's always going to struggle defensively as well. When you talk about the fit, I don't dislike the pure fit so much if they move off of DeRozan, because you talk about Ayo and Kobe as being good with the ball in their hands, and they are, but they're also very good spot-up players, and neither of them are ever going to be your lead ball handler. So if you just want to bring in more aggregate playmaking, more ball handling, like, I'm good with that. I think that Josh Giddey is your best pure playmaker here, and he is unequivocally at his best out of pick and roll. Right, when he can get a screen and he can make all the reads there, and if he's facing drop, he can get to his floater where he has at least decent touch there. It's much better than having to rely on his catch-and-shoot jumper or attacking a closeout with his athleticism, finishing at the rim. He's going to struggle significantly in all of those categories. But it's just about my outlook on Josh Giddey as a player, because him playing off ball so much in OKC was not good for him. But I do still struggle to think of the scenario in which it's like we want Josh Giddey to be our lead ball handler. Because even here, it's like you're going to have a healthy split of possessions that are dictated by him, dictated by Kobe, dictated by Io. If DeMar is there, obviously that mucks things up all that much more. And then when Giddey is away from the ball, he really, really struggles to have even an average impact on the game. Like, we're talking about teams not guarding him. We're talking about teams roaming off of him and him being completely incapable of making them pay. So that's just where I think is a value proposition. It's really, really inexcusable because you could have gotten two-way wings, right? You could have gotten connective pieces who, at the very least, you wouldn't like have a clear look at what they aren't. And it's very clear what Josh Giddey is not at this point. And that to me is a high-level starter or a guy who has a clear path to get there. As I always say, it's pretty simple. When a guy really struggles to shoot the basketball, when a guy is a well below average NBA athlete, and when a guy really struggles to defend, he's not going to succeed in the league. You can't point to anybody in that archetype who has all three of those issues and is a good basketball player at this level. And that's Josh Giddey.
You know, I think you make a couple of great points there, Carson. One about Dosunmu and Kobe's skill sets. Both of them are great spot-up players. Kobe statistically was one of the best spot-up scorers in all of the league last year. He's a tremendous deep-range shooter, just shooter overall. He's a special, special shooter. Great at attacking closeouts. Great when advantages are created for him. But I do wonder about Giddey as a lead ball handler with his scoring concerns and how guys are going to respect him. I worry about him, again, complete and playing that off-ball role with his shot not translating. The biggest issue is the opportunity cost of this all. I think Giddey is an asset that you have questions about, especially as a star. And Caruso is such a valuable asset, right? That is the name of the game here, maximizing our assets. I think the way to maximize Caruso's value is to go get that top 10 pick, is to go and move him for 2 first. Again, man, it's the NBA, man. It's hard to get first-round picks. Some team is willing to throw you 2 first. Man, I'm eating that up. You can do a lot with that. I think it's a bad move. I'm happy that Caruso gets out of Chicago. Please, man, let him go play winning basketball somewhere. Yeah. I just question if that's what this seems like that though, right? Like that Chicago thinks that Giddey is going to be a star. That's the kind of feel that you get from this, right? That he's going to be your number one guy. I don't know why Chicago views him like that, but I feel like that's the only reason that they would turn down those picks to get Giddey.
I don't know about a star, but I do think it says to me that they think he's going to be a high-level starter, because Caruso is a high-level starter, and in terms of timeline, absolutely, Giddey makes more sense. If they can choose a timeline, because right now they don't have a timeline, they have 2 timelines, and neither of them have a particularly good outlook. But you had the opportunity to, again, get multiple assets with which you could have selected whatever sort of player you want. So clearly they are quite high on Giddey overall, and I would say definitely higher than the consensus around the league. On the flip side of this, though, for OKC, Logan, I love this. I absolutely love this. And Sam Presti just continues to cook as he has been doing for a decade and a half. Caruso is not the biggest need for this team. We know that they are already pretty rich with quality backcourt and wing defenders, versatile guys on both sides of the ball there. But in terms of a value proposition for them, like, this is pretty clearly addition by subtraction, because Giddey, especially in OKC, we had seen the bottom fall out there. Like, there was no reason to bring that guy back for next year. This is an insane get considering what I would have expected them getting back for Giddey. Caruso's a top 3 perimeter defender on the planet, and he is a very versatile offensive player. He fits in with a lot of what OKC wants to do. Loves getting out in the open floor, very effective in transition. They love to play with pace. He's a guy who can handle the ball, was quite efficient as a pick-and-roll creator this year, but it's really, really good away from the ball. Awesome cutter. At times, you can even use him as a screener, which is awesome because we know that OKC loves to get creative with the guard-on-guard screens. With Chet inverted pick-and-roll, Caruso can be effective there. And he just had a career 3-point shooting season. He was 41% from deep on 5 attempts per game. So you are bringing in a winning player, a veteran who has contributed meaningfully to an NBA title already in his career, who fits your system, fits your identity quite nicely for a player who you had no reason to hold on to. And what I think is particularly awesome about this move is not just how great it is to add Caruso in a vacuum, it's also what you continue to open up in terms of options for this team going forward. Because you have Caruso for this year on an insane value contract. He's making under 10 million, and then you're going to pay him after that, maybe in the neighborhood of 20 million. This is a really, really valuable role player. But crucially to me, this makes you so confident in your ability to trade away Lou Dort and lose zero sleep over that. Because he's kind of been the guy who you've seen in all the packages, right? If it's for marketing, just as a matter of making the contracts match up. But you don't just want to lose Lou Dort without a replacement. And he's an awesome point of attack defender. He just had a career 3-point shooting season. You put Caruso in that role, and I think that you are getting really a slight upgrade in that spot. You're not having to ask Aaron Wiggins or Isaiah Joe to take like a real leap up in terms of role. And OKC has still a lot of cap this offseason. They have so many picks. It's disgusting. Really, Logan, there is a strong case that if they handle this offseason correctly and if they make a splashy move, they will be the title frontrunner. And this was just another move that cemented that status and that opportunity for them. And the window's just really starting, man. I mean, they were the 1 seed this past year. It was always clear that they were destined for greatness, but that was ahead of schedule. And now this is another move that puts them on pace to just continue to leap ahead of schedule and maybe really start something special over the next handful of years and even more.
Word to Jay-Z, public service announcement. If Sam Presti calls your line, hang the phone up, bro. If Danny Ainge calls your line, hang the phone up, man. If Brad Stevens calls your line, hang the phone up, dude. Yeah, like, Sam Presti has made so many good moves for such a long time. I just don't know how guys are... It's the Bulls. Actually, you know what, man? The Bulls are just suckers. The Bulls are just chumps. Like,
sorry, Bulls fans.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm actually sorry for Chicago Bulls fans.
Because I don't think any Bulls fan is happy with anything about how the front office has approached the team for so long.
And you know what's sad, dude?
They don't make changes. Carson Ovis is still there. Billy Donovan is still there. They're maybe going to re-sign DeRozan. It's crazy.
The front office also has no incentive to do this because the Bulls have the best fan base in all of basketball. They pack the United Center every single game. They sell that MF out because the Bulls fans love you guys. And you never... Yeah. And look, I'm not saying the Bulls aren't fun, because I tell you what, man, I do quite enjoy watching a Chicago Bulls game. It always seems like it comes down to the wire. They're within 5 points at the end of the basketball game, and I don't know, DeMar and Kobe are going to do some heroics to win it. Like, Bulls games are fun, but as a fan, man, I don't want to just win games. I want to crush the other team, and I want to actually have a chance at winning a title, right? Yeah. The Bulls just... they have no incentive to get better. They're a chicken with their head cut off, man. There's no direction, and it's a slow death.
Really unfortunate. But OKC is on the exact opposite side of the spectrum because I love everything that they do. And Caruso was going to be a huge needle mover for whoever could add him, and that's really significant in this arms race, too. You keep him away from everybody else.
And you talk about trading Dort. I understand why, and I think if you have to bite the bullet to go and get an asset like Lauri Markkanen, and you do that in a heartbeat just because there's such a level of offensive talent upgrade, but I also do like the idea of holding on to him and having, I think about this is a potential, just second unit. Like, if you want all clamps, the versatility with like Kayson, Caruso, Lou Dort, you have potential to just have some special lineup combinations, man, come playoff time or throughout the regular season where you've got such great two-way guys throughout the entire lineup. But I understand.
You don't need all of them. I didn't even mention Kayson when I was listing the dudes who could step up, and Kayson is the best out of those backup guards and wings. I think he's just awesome. But Logan, it's like you can only play so many of those dudes. We're already talking about like Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, Kayson. These are dudes who are only playing 15, 20 minutes a night who could obviously be doing more elsewhere. And you still have a clear need, which is you need to upgrade that 4 spot. You need a big physical forward who can play there. I would be going all in on Markkanen, dude. At this point, I just don't think there's any reason not to. You have everything else in place. If you can add a top 25 player who is basically a perfect fit for you, especially offensively. You maintain all of your principles there. He's one of the best off-ball players in the league, one of the best shooting bigs in the league, and defensively he can hang and he can really help you on the glass. If you don't go all in for that dude, when you have more picks than you know what to do with and you have the perfect security plan for moving Dort, do it. Just do it. Do it now. And give Utah an offer that is so ridiculous that they can't refuse it. Because, okay, you'll have to pay Markkanen after this year. You'll have to pay Caruso after this year. But, again, they're still in a spot where it's like they have flexibility in terms of cap. And you can win the title this year, like very, very, very possibly win the title if you make those moves. You might be the front runner going into it. You could easily surpass Boston. Think about how good you were last year without that sort of major upgrade at your biggest position of need. So, OKC, congrats. Job's not finished in terms of building out this roster, but this was another really good step from them. Get ready for a night full of big fights and big action. It's UFC 303, and it can be even bigger. Jump in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC.
It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a fighter to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your fighter, and place your first bet. It's that simple. The light heavyweight title is on the line in the main event, but there are so many more amazing matchups happening in Vegas.
And speaking of amazing, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Get that big fight feel only on DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Okay, let's talk draft now, Logan. We've got a bunch of sort of rapid fire questions that we're going to cover today just to preview the class overall. We did our mock on Wednesday. You guys can go watch that. We picked for every lottery team as we would if we were GMs. And we were not worried about the consensus in that process. This was about our personal opinions. So with that being said, Logan, who is the player you are highest on versus the consensus in this class?
I've talked about this gentleman a lot if you've been tuned into NerdSesh for some time now. It's definitely Isaiah Collier, point guard out of USC. I've seen Collier get mocked mid-teens, the late 20s in a lot of mocks. I think Collier grades as a top 10 guy for me. I think he has the potential to be the best point guard in this draft class. I love the makeup of what Collier does. He's a strong, stout point guard. I love his process out of the pick and roll. I love how he uses his physicality on drives against everybody. I think he's got the makeup to be a really good two-way player. He's got great hustle and energy, even as like a help side kind of guy on drives. I think Collier has the potential to be a really good defender, but I like his makeup as a potential lead ball handler, man. I like his touch. He's got a decent floater game, and I've loved the flashes of the off-the-dribble shooting that we've seen from him. He's got a ways to go there in terms of consistency, but he's had games where he's knocking down shots from really deep from behind the arc, where he's hitting these off-the-dribble kind of moves, and he's very, very young. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him, man. I really like Collier, but the biggest thing to me that is going to translate in the league is how strong he is. I just love how physical of a driver he is. I think that's going to translate really well to the league. And go back and watch some tape on him, man. Like he's good at finishing, against like really bigger guys who are a lot bigger than him, man. I don't think that's going to be a problem at the next level. So, yeah, I would take him. And we didn't take him in the mock, and that's not an issue of talent for me. It's an issue of fit. I want Collier to go someplace where he can actually get burned and get minutes immediately. I don't want him to get drafted and go to a team where he's going to be buried on the bench for a couple of years. I want the guy to get immediate experience and play. So him not going in our mock draft was not an issue of my evaluation of his talent. It's more of a stylistical fit. But for me, it's Collier. I love the makeup of his game.
I'm not quite as high on Collier as you are. I would not have him as a top 10 guy, for example. And I think really the key for him in a number of categories is just going to be consistency. For those who don't know, this is Isaiah Collier from USC. He was a super, super highly regarded high school prospect, top 3 guy in the class. It's going to be about the consistency of the shot. It's going to be about the consistency of his decision-making, which could be pretty reckless at times. And I'm just not as sure that I'm as high on like some of the ceiling stuff with him. Like I don't really see that A trait for Isaiah Collier. I absolutely think the strength, but when I look at the overall athleticism in terms of verticality, like I think that he's a solid athlete defensively. I like how he competes. I think his frame is good there, but he's like 6'2.5" with a 6'5" wingspan. Like he's not a really big guard. So just doesn't have a standout enough trait for me to sell him as a top 10 prospect when there's also some concerns, some question marks in his game. So for me, a guy who's very much on the flip side of that, another Pac-12 guy, is Tristan da Silva out of Colorado, 23 years old, as pro-ready as anybody in this class, just is in the exact archetype of the sort of player that any contender should be looking to pick up in the mid-first if you can. OKC, we were just talking about at 12, you want a big forward who can rebound, who can play make, who can shoot, who can put the ball on the floor, who can defend multiple positions. Tristan da Silva is a really good option there, especially if it's like you get him and then you add an Avdia and then you add a Larry Markin, and then I think that their front court would be looking amazing. I'm just incredibly confident in him being a good basketball player. The other guy who has definitely more of a range of outcomes is Nikola Topic, who has been falling recently in this draft process and has gone from a guy who was viewed as a sort of top 5 prospect to now maybe falling out of the lottery entirely because he tore his ACL. That seems to be sort of the prevailing concern. But I think there's a strong case that he's the best offensive player in this class. He is a really effective driver, very shifty, great change in pace, really good below the rim finisher, great touch around the rim. He's the best passer in this class, 6'7", bunch of angles there, really dynamic, creative passer, like awesome feel with the roller. Super efficient creator out of both pick and roll and isolation. The concern with him offensively is just what is he as an off the dribble shooter? What is he in terms of his floater touch, his intermediate game? Because he hasn't been great there. But I think that his touch, I mean, he's an amazing free throw shooter, like 87% there, makes me relatively confident in that shot projecting. And if it does, I think he's one of very few guys in this class with a sort of star ceiling offensively. And defensively, I think he's always going to have issues. He's just not a particularly good athlete. Logan, you said last show that he was listed with a 7-foot wingspan. Just want to clear up because that's what his camp had been pushing for a long time. It's actually not the case. It was measured at like 6'6". Why were they lying by so much? I don't know. Pretty silly. It didn't look like a 7-foot wingspan on tape. It wasn't helping him defensively, clearly, and you knew that it was going to get measured at some point. But I do worry about him defensively, but I just think, again, if he's maybe the best offensive player in this class and he's going 15, and I think because of his size, he at least won't be like relentlessly targeted defensively. I really like the guy, and in a vacuum, I would definitely take him in the top 10. On the flip side of this, Logan, who is the player who you are lowest on versus the consensus in this class?
Projected number 1 overall pick in some mocks, Zachary Risachet is probably the guy I'm lowest on, and not by much. I think Risachet is a lottery guy to fringe top 10. We took him 7th in the mock. I think that's about right for Risachet. I just don't understand the number 1 pick hype. There's a lot of concerns for me in terms of just how well-rounded he's going to be. One, my primary concern is if this is a guy that you're going to put the ball in his hands a lot, doesn't create a lot of downhill pressure, right? Isn't the greatest ball handler or passer. His one standout trait is that he shoots really well. So, great. That's a really valuable skill to have. But what else does he do for you offensively is what I question. He shot 44% of his looks from behind the arc. Overwhelmingly, his shot palette is just threes. And then defensively, I worry about him. He is slight of frame. He's not the greatest athlete. Yeah, I just worry about how he impacts the game really outside of his shooting. I'd much rather take a guy who has a better athletic profile, who can create more downhill pressure, who's maybe shot as a project but does a lot of other great things. I trust his shot. I really do, and I think he brings that immediately. But I worry about Risachet in all the other areas other than his shot. And again, this isn't a criticism of him as a prospect. It's just I don't really understand where the number 1 pick hype is coming from.
Obviously, this is a weak class, and so you look at it differently. It's especially weak in terms of the top, but I do think there's a much clear-cut path to stardom for like an Alex Sarr, even though he has his offensive limitations, because if you're a dominant defensive big and then you do enough things offensively, good finisher off the roll, he's shown flashes of floor spacing, flashes of connective passing, there's just a much clearer path there. If you're just a straight up 3-and-D wing, you can be a really good NBA player, but there's really no path to stardom when you have the sort of limitations as an off the dribble creator and finisher around the rim that Rees does, in my opinion. So he would definitely be on my short list here as well. And not to be anti-French, because I'm not. I'm going to learn French, you guys. Okay, I've got Spanish and Italian in my bag. French is up next. My father's name is Pierre, so don't accuse me of any sort of anti-French bias, because I can see all you guys. I can see your heads working already. It might be Tijon Salon, who has just like been shooting up draft boards. And I was with the initial rise. Like, this guy is one of the most special athletes in this class. I think he has the potential to be one of the best defenders in this class. Absolutely. And I think he's very good at weaponizing his athleticism, super high motor, really good cutter. His three-point shot has improved. Like, I really like that sort of profile for Salon and what he can grow into. But now I'm seeing him as like a top 6, top 8 guy on a lot of people's boards and a lot of people's mocks. And I would probably be more inclined to take him somewhere in that 10 to 14 range. I definitely see the ceiling, and it's a higher ceiling than you get with some of these guys who maybe I would take in the top 10. But in this class, I am leaning more on whose floor am I confident in, and who do I think can really be a contributor to winning, especially because so many teams, Logan, are just closer than they've ever been. Like, so many teams have a building block or two, and those winning players, if you're confident you're going to land one, are really, really valuable. And I just think it's a couple years before Salon is doing anything meaningful in the league. So I just think the questions about creation off the dribble are very real. The handle is not polished, and the three-point shot is still a question mark. So this is what I said last time. The spectrum for a guy like this is sort of like the Sekou Naboya to Giannis spectrum. And I can see the intrigue of the upside. I can also see the concerns with the downside. And that makes me maybe a little less high on him than some of these people who he's rocketed up the board are. Okay, Logan, who is your favorite sleeper talent in this draft? And by sleeper, we're not talking like deep second round, just because we've mostly been focused on lottery. We're talking late first, early second round kind of guys who you just love.
Oh, no, I actually did write 2 late second round guys down.
Go for it.
These guys, I'm really surprised that they're not mocked. I've seen so many spots not mocked to get taken until either like late second round in the 50s or undrafted completely. One of these guys that I've seen that has been undrafted in a lot of mocks is Quentin Post out of Boston College. Now, I understand a little bit why he's not getting mocked. He's 24 years old. He's one of the oldest prospects in this class. But you talk about drafting guys with really high floors, and I think this guy can play immediately. He's a really big center, or not really big center, but he's a big guy, 7 foot, 244 pounds, 7 foot 2.5 wingspan. He's just really skilled for a guy this size. Like, he shot 43% on 3 threes a game. He's a guy who can attack closeouts. He can really put the rock on the floor, and I love his touch, man. He's got a floater game. He's got post hooks. He's got post fades. He's got great touch on layups. Now, on the flip side, like, he's a limited athlete, and I question maybe his defensive ceiling. But he racked up nearly 2 blocks per game. Boston College was 22 points worse per 100 possessions with him off the floor than on. Like, he's just a really skilled stretch 5, and I think in the modern NBA, you know, this is just a really rare archetype that you wouldn't see 10 years ago, that you wouldn't see 20 years ago. Now, as it is with all of these kind of limited athletes, you know, skilled guys, where does he fall on the, like, Frank Kaminsky to, you know, Luke Cornett spectrum? Like, where does he fall on that?
That's the whole spectrum?
No. These are the guys on the low end. These are guys on the low end.
I was going to say, bro, I'll just pass.
What's the high end, man? Like Brad Miller? What's the high
Ryan
end of the
Anderson.
skilled? Oh my gosh.
Cal Bear, Ryan Anderson.
Dude.
No, what are you talking about? There's a bunch of skilled stretch bigs. Well, I don't know. Are you just talking offensively?
I put on the high end as like a Nikola Vucevic, right? That's the kind of high end, like, stretch 5, I guess, like limited athlete. But I say limited athlete, I still don't think he's going to be like a negative. I think the guy can legitimately protect the rim. I think he's a good defender. He's not like a complete bum there. I think he can actually do it, and he's really experienced. But just how skilled he is. Like, I think this guy has legitimate touch. I think he can attack closeouts. I think he's deceptive. He's got a great pump fake and getting into the lane. He's just too damn big and too damn skilled for me to not see this guy, like, at least getting a crack at the league. And it really surprises me that he's not getting mocked to get drafted. I think he's really skilled. And then the other guy I want to give a shout to is Antonio Reeves out of Kentucky. Same kind of thing as Quentin Post. He's an older guy in this class. He's 23 years old, but Reeves has had a lot of experience. He's 6'5", 190 pounds, 6'8" wingspan. And he's a Kentucky guard, man. He reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Quickly in some ways.
Kentucky guards.
Good shooter. I think you can run actions for him if it's spot up, curling around screens. Great at attacking closeouts. He's a really good pull-up shooter. Great floater game. Good at running in transition. I think you're looking at a really skilled bench scorer. And maybe that's not the most intriguing thing to teams, but again, in a draft like this, I want guys who can just play. And I think Antonio Reeves can step into the league immediately, and I think he can play and give you a solid 20 minutes a night. Again, I don't think you're looking at superstars in either of these guys, but I think they can both ball, and they're really, really skilled talents. Again, I don't know if it's the age thing, but I think these two guys are much too skilled to not get drafted.
So I am looking in a different range for this question. Now, you are talking about truer sleepers. Good for you. I'm just talking about guys who I really like in that late first, early second range. First one, Logan, I'm so thrilled that I get to shout out a California Golden Bear and truly believe it. I love Jalen Tyson, man. Transfer from Texas Tech, who just absolutely popped this past year. To me, one of the most versatile players in this class, and the sort of wing who I am just incredibly confident in succeeding because of that. A lot of that versatility is on the offensive end. Like, this is a guy who is very effective with the ball in his hands. He was super efficient as a pick and roll creator, 77th percentile, 71st percentile isolation creator, and that is a combination of scoring skill and his passing ability. Like, he is pretty athletic and really strong downhill driver, and he's shifty. He's a little bit tough to stay in front of as well. But then he also has pretty legit passing touch and anticipation. He can see various angles at his height. He also has quite a nice post game, 74th percentile post-up player, and he's got, again, the physicality, solid touch on turnarounds, and he can pass out of all of these actions. But then it's a lot of the complementary stuff that he does as well. He's an excellent cutter. He is a willing screener at his size. Super valuable in the league to be able to do this many things. He's a solid three-point shooter. I think you want to see him more consistent there, but 36% from deep, 80% from the line. Like, he's pretty much good at everything offensively. Not necessarily great at anything, but good at everything. And then he's an elite positional rebounder, averaged like 7 boards a game, and a really versatile defender. So the production was outstanding. He gave you 27 and 3.5 on 56% true shooting. And because he has so many positive traits, so many things that he has at least slightly above average at, I think there's clearly a role for him at the next level, kind of regardless of where you put him. The other guy, also a very productive college player who just has a lot of traits that I think translates. Another guy who is really good at a number of things, that's Kyle Filipowski, who college basketball fans will be much more familiar with because he's one of the best players in the country at Duke. I really love this guy's offensive versatility as well. Here we're talking about a big, but a big who has like some wing traits, like really comfortable handling, really comfortable putting the ball on the floor. Small sample size, but he averaged 1.2 points per off the dribble jumper this year. Now, his jump shot is something of a question because he's like 32% from deep over 2 seasons and about 72% from the line. But I like his shot. I'm confident in him being at least an average 3-point shooter. And then you have this guy who has good touch as a finisher. It's sort of inconsistent with him in terms of how much he embraces the physicality down there. But I wouldn't say that he's consistently overwhelmed, and then has a really nice polished post game. He's got turnarounds, he's got spins, he's got hooks. He can just do everything that you want from a big or even a wing. He can post up, he can roll, he can isolate and attack mismatches there. He can spot up. He's a good cutter. Like, he was above average efficiency through every single one of those play types that I just mentioned. And then he does a lot of connective stuff as a passer. He's very capable there. He even ran just 8 pick and rolls, but he averaged 1.25 points per possession there. So, like, I do think he has some ability to create off the dribble and do some of that creative inverted pick and roll stuff at the next level. But really, whatever role you put him in offensively, he's going to bring you value. And then defensively, I think, again, he's versatile. He can play multiple pick and roll coverages. I think that he's a guy you're comfortable switching. He guards well in space. He doesn't have the sort of like elite rim protection, the sort of elite athleticism to like really, really hold it down at the 5 for you. But I think if he's mostly playing the 4, some minutes at the 5, you're getting good value on both sides of the ball. And again, it's that versatility. I'm just very confident in him being a quality NBA player. And so that's the selling point to me with both those guys. It's just floor versatility that I really buy into. Okay, Logan, I'm going to ask you a specific question about 2 of the top prospects in this draft, because we talk about Filipowski being one of the most prominent college guys. 2 of the absolute most prominent college guys who just won a title together are very close on a lot of draft boards and very well may both be top 5 picks, that being Stephon Castle and Donovan Clingan from UConn. Which of those 2 do you prefer as a prospect?
I think it depends really on
Coward.
What you want. I'm going to say Castle because of positional value. I just think a guard with his skill set is just a little harder to find, and I don't mean that in any disrespect to Clingan. Clingan's a special rim protector, and I think Clingan's probably going to be better as a rookie. Like, I think he's just going to be more impactful in terms of how he can change the game completely defensively. So I think I like Clingan's floor a little more. I like Castle's ceiling a little more. And again, I think it's harder to find these do-it-all, really athletic guards than it is to find a good rim protector. And so that's why I would take Castle. I think his ceiling is way higher. Who am I more confident in being a winning and immediate impact guy? It's Clingan for sure, but I really, really like Castle's ceiling, man.
So I totally agree with everything you just said. There's no question Clingan has the higher floor. There's no question that Castle has the higher ceiling. So to some extent, I guess it comes down to how big do you think the gap in ceiling is and how confident are you in Castle reaching his ceiling? I'm going to lean him, even though I don't have like resounding answers to those questions. Like, I do worry about his shot, and I worry about him not really having an A-plus trait offensively, although he's a really good athlete and he's quite a good passer. Like, I don't think that you're giving him A-plus grades there. And then I worry about the shot. And if you struggle as a shooter, you struggle as a touch shot maker, like, you're not going to be a lead ball handler in this league. If he gets to be okay there, if he's average, then I think you're looking at a stud. Because even though most of the time when you look at a guard whose shot you're worried about, it's kind of like, hey, I'm probably going to stay away from that guy. He does so many other things. Because of his athleticism and his length defensively, he's just an insane competitor there. Because he's one of the best offensive rebounding and just an excellent overall rebounding guard, there is still a floor there. He's going to be able to impact the game without scoring. Not like Clingan, because Clingan is going to be an elite rim protector. He's going to be an elite rebounder. He's a super efficient post scorer, really good finisher, coordinated, soft touch, and he's massive, and he's a good passer. This one's tough for me. This one is really, really tough. I honestly hadn't decided when I started answering this question, but I do feel like you kind of know what best case scenario for Clingan is, and it's just a good starter. And Castle can be more than that, but my confidence quotient in Clingan being a good starter is like crazy, crazy high. Like, this dude will not fail. I guarantee you he will be a good NBA player, and he will be a pretty damn good NBA player as a rookie. You think about what Walker Kessler could do. Imagine if that guy was bigger and just better offensively in every way, right? Even more physical, even more skilled, better passer. That's kind of what you're getting with Donovan Clingan. All right, speaking of high floors, Logan, if you were to put together a starting 5 of the highest floor guys in this class, because that's a theme that we've talked about, betting on floors with these dudes, maybe as opposed to ceilings in other classes, who'd be in that starting 5 for you?
I would start Castle, actually. I think his floor, with what he brings in the aggregate, you question his shot. I still would have him here with his defensive ceiling, with his defensive floor, with his athletic floor. I think he does so many other great things. I think he's still going to be a really good player. I'd say Reed Shepherd with his shooting, I think just brings you.
Yeah.
He's going to be great. Like, I think he's going to be around for a long time. Like, I think that's just going to keep him around, and he does other great things too. I think he's got legitimate point guard chops, handling out of the pick and roll. I think he's a good decision maker. I like his handle. I like a lot of what Reed Shepherd brings. Connect with his experience. I think that dude is just wired to get buckets. I think he's immediately going to come in and probably give a team 10 to 15 efficiently, maybe more. Good spot up player, good in the mid range, good everywhere. I just think this is a guy that you're going to be able to run actions for, and he's going to get buckets. Buzelis is also here for me at the 4 spot, and while I question his offensive game, I really wonder where Buzelis is going to get consistent offense from the perimeter. Like, I wonder about his shot. I wonder about his off the dribble game, but good cutter. He's a good shooter from the corners, too. I think Buzelis, at the bare minimum, is going to be a good corner shooter if you need him to be. If you just need him to go sit over there, I think he can do that. But what he does, playmaking, he's a good decision maker, can handle a little bit. It's really about what he brings defensively as a help side guy and a rim protector. Just positioning. I always trust Buzelis to be in the right spot at the right time. He's great in transition. So I like that about his game. And then I think Klingon has to be the pick here at the 5.
Yeah.
That guy, he might be the highest floor guy in this class. Klingon is, you said it well, man. I'm so confident that guy is just going to be great immediately. So I think he's a no-brainer there.
Yeah, it's Klingon or Shepherd for the highest floor, and De Silva. So those are a pretty easy 3 in my starting 5. In my backcourt, I'm going to go with a guy who we really haven't talked about. Maybe he doesn't literally have one of the 5 highest floors. I don't care. He's a super high floor guy, and I really like his game, and I think he probably does. And that's Tyler Kolek out of Marquette, another guy who was a great college basketball player, 23 years old, but this is just an incredibly mature offensive player. When you're thinking about what you want from either a awesome backup point guard or a really solid starting point guard along a more dynamic scoring too, because you need to have a dynamic scoring guard in the league today, but you can bring value just as being an awesome playmaker who is a solid scorer. That's Kolek. And I do think that he's legit a good scorer as well. He's quick. He's shifty. He's just incredibly crafty. He has awesome touch as a finisher. And he's a really, really awesome shooter, up close to 40% from deep. But then as a passer, just very, very selfless. Makes all the reads. So his limitations are kind of the same of any small guard who's not a great athlete, because this guy is small. He's 6'1" with a 6'3" wingspan. Defensively, although I think that he competes, that means he is going to be targeted. Offensively, that presents some issues in terms of finishing against NBA rim protection, but man, he tends to chisel his way to his spot and get up a pretty good look. I just am very confident in him being a good offensive player, and he's going to get attacked defensively, but he has the right mentality, and he's just a dog, dude, and a leader. Just a guy who I would want on my basketball team. My last spot here, I'm going to go with Devin Carter out of Providence, and he's not my favorite prospect overall, but the reason that he's so high on draft boards right now is unequivocally the floor. There's a theme with a lot of these guys. They tend to be older. Carter, 22 years old, and is just going to do a lot of things that help winning basketball. Offensively, he's versatile. There's really nothing that he can't do at least a decent level. This is a guy who will screen for you. This is a guy who will cut away from the ball. Pretty good shooter, physical driver, solid playmaker, and then defensively is really, really going to compete. The reason that I'm not as high on him as some is I do think that his ceiling is pretty darn low if you're talking about taking him top 10. But I think that floor is still really high. And I'll give an honorable mention here to Zach Edey, because I'm just pretty darn confident in his combination of overwhelming size and physicality and pretty good touch out of the post, and then his size and all those same traits as a roll man and the pure rim protection. Zach Edey's going to get 18 minutes a night in the NBA for quite some time. I'm pretty confident about that. Another guy, though, where the ceiling maybe isn't as high and the fit isn't intuitive in every spot, because a lot of teams aren't dying to add a lumbering 5 as their starting guy and their only real option at the 5, because he's going to struggle to guard in space. But he's going to produce. He's going to produce in his minutes on the floor. I can tell you that much. All right, Logan. Last question, and then we're going to get into some very specific teams, how we think they should approach the draft, who we didn't touch on in our lottery mock. Who do you think is most likely to trade up into the top 5 in this class?
This draft is interesting because, there are so many. There's not a lot of high ceiling guys in this class previous years. So I think you really have to, have full confidence in a guy if you're trading up to make the deal. The only team that really makes sense to me is Memphis moving up from 9 because they have such a major positional need at the 5 spot. And the one guy who I think is a concrete home run, like the guy's going to be great, is Donovan Clingan. And so I think it addresses probably their biggest need, which is at the 5 spot. And I think him and Jaren Jackson Jr. immediately would be a really potent interior, combination. So again, I think you have to be really confident that the guy you're getting is going to work, is going to fit, is going to be great. And Memphis has one of the biggest needs there at the 5 spot in the draft. And so, I think they have an asset that makes it intriguing, right? For a team later in the draft, if you were picking it in the late 20s, you'd have to attach a bunch of assets to move up. For Memphis, it's actually attainable because you give the team the 9th pick, you give them one player, bang, boom, both sides are happy, and they get their guy. So I would say Memphis trading up to get Clingan is probably the most likely outcome.
Yeah, it's very, very feasible, and it's been rumored that Memphis wants to do this. So I don't know exactly what that package would look like. Maybe it's the 9th pick and a future first. Maybe it is the 9th pick, and I don't think that they would want to trade a Vince Williams or anybody like that. They don't want to trade Marcus Smart, it's been reported, but even if it's another second on top of that future first, that's fine. To me, the gap in terms of security that you're getting between Donovan Clingan and whoever you'd be picking at 9, and crucially, the positional need, because I just don't think that Memphis can proceed with Triple J at the 5. I think that their defense falls off a cliff. I think that his inadequacies as a rebounder, what you lose when he's not allowed to roam as the 4, like Steven Adams was really important to this team's success. And I understand that you're limiting your ceiling offensively when you have a non-floor spacing 5, but I think that it offsets the value with what you're gaining defensively because it's just crucial. Memphis kind of has to be a great team defense to really succeed, and I think that requires putting a 5 alongside Triple J. Clingan is the perfect kind of dude. So I would say it's probably Houston who you target at 3 because Houston really has no reason to sit there and pick trading with a division rival, but I think it's very possible, and I think it could end up being a real win-win. All right, Logan. So we mocked the full lottery on Wednesday, but I want to talk about some of the more specific teams who are contending, who are maybe big-name franchises, whose plans we didn't get to touch on at all. We're going to work our way chronologically through after the lottery, starting with the Miami Heat at pick 15. Where would you like them to go?
And to be clear, too, for logical continuity purposes, I'm going to go based off of our lottery. The guys that are already gone are not going to be available here.
Oh, interesting. I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
But I don't play by the rules, so keep that in mind.
Miami, I think if Devin Carter is available at 15 would be a real good get. I just think I don't know, man, he seems like a Miami Heat kind of player, doing all the little things, being a good defender, rebounding, little stuff like that. And I think it's a big need for them, right? They've got Jaquez, they've got Jovic, they've got their young wings that they're going to bank on. So I think they should go out and get a guard. I think it's probably the biggest need for them. And, again, I think Carter's just a real winner, man. He seems like a real gritty kind of Miami Heat basketball player. The one thing that I'm concerned about is shooting right around Jimmy Butler. You want legitimate floor spacers, so maybe you would prefer a Jared McCain maybe here, but I really like Devin Carter and all of his winning traits, and he just seems like he would fit with Miami's culture, so I'm going with him at 15 to Miami.
Like it. I think that'd be great. I think that Carter is probably not going to be there. This guy might not be there either, but Tristan da Silva, to me, would be the dream. And by the way, this will not be the last time that I mention Tristan da Silva because I think he's the dream for a lot of teams that are in the position where you're already proven as a playoff team. Who do you want? A pro-ready, big wing who can defend multiple positions, playmake, everything that I already talked about. I would just love that, and especially in Miami because although they've added size, they are still quite small. I think that would be a really meaningful upgrade for them. And if Nikola Topic falls that far also, just to give an alternate, I think that having that sort of offensive injection would be really nice for them, because we know that that sort of lack of all-around skill is an issue. I would probably prioritize having a real quality forward, but they need more offensive skill. Topic could bring that. Maybe it conflicts with Hero and Rozier, but I just think that'd be a really good value pick. Plus, then you have Nikola Topic and Nikola Jovic, and that's sick. Okay, how about the Sixers, Logan? Just one pick after them at 16.
I would take Terrence Shannon Jr. here if I'm
Ooh.
Philly. With Kelly Oubre potentially maybe getting priced out for Philadelphia, I think he'd be a good replacement. I like a lot of the things Shannon brings, playing with physicality, getting downhill, quickness, athleticism. And I like his shot. It's a little janky, but it's also just really hard to evaluate lefties shooting the basketball. Even as a left-hander myself, man, I just can't. It just
You think
looks
it's
a
just
little.
not aesthetic?
It just looks a little funky, man. Uh, yeah, man, the way lefties shoot the ball. But I like Shannon's fit here. I think he brings some perimeter defense too. Again, you're looking for pieces that just fit, and Philadelphia's got a lot of question marks. I think they only have like two guys under contract for next season:
Yeah,
Paul
that's
Reed
crazy.
and Embiid.
That's all
But
you need.
again, potentially G League MVP Paul Reed. Don't forget that. If Oubre leaves, I think Terrence Shannon Jr. would be a good replacement. I also am considering Jacoby Walter here, but I'm a little more confident in Terrence Shannon Jr. and what he brings elsewhere than Jacoby.
Yeah, I think most people would definitely say that this is a reach for Shannon, but also it's like you're fine taking a 24-year-old. He's basically 24 if you're Philly. You just want dudes who can impact winning now. But I had, again, written down Tristan da Silva as the dream, but I think that he probably goes before this. And then I had Jacoby Walter as the other guy. I just think that upgrading on the wings is going to be the priority for them. And maybe that's going out and getting a big star like Paul George, but I think it's just overall maintaining your versatility there. And Walter, I think you have some questions about his finishing around the rim. He wasn't great there. He's a guy who there have been questions about, like, how much of an on-ball creator is he, because there's been flashes of playmaking. He's definitely got some wiggle, but like not a super advanced shot creator. But I just don't think that matters all that much in Philly. I think you can just take whatever little bits of juice as a passer and creator off the bounce that you get from him. Mostly it's going to be about him knocking down his triples, and it's going to be about him defending. And he rebounds well for a guard. He moves pretty well laterally. He's got a 6'10 wingspan. He's a little bit slight, but I still think he would be overall a positive contributor, at least as much as you could expect from a guy of his age, basically 20, in that sort of 3-and-D role. I just like to see Philly go wing. I think that's definitely what makes the most sense. Okay, how about the Lakers, Logan? One pick behind them at number 17.
The Lakers pick is interesting here because last year, if you remember, they took Jalen Hood-Schifino
Yeah.
over like Jaime
Hawkes,
Jaquez. They took him over
Cam
Brandon
Whitmore,
Podziemski.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about like immediate impact guys. So it really depends on what the front office wants to do. If they want to punt and like move on a different timeline, I would probably take a young guy. I don't think that makes sense. I think you take a winning asset that helps
They're not
LeBron
punting,
James
my
and
friend.
Anthony Davis right now. So I would probably take a guard. I would either take Devin Carter if he's here, or I would
Not
take
going to be
Jared
there.
McCain. I don't think Devin Carter's going to be available. So I think I would take Jared McCain just in terms of shot making. He brings you another guard that can actually hit shots. You need that. With D'Lo's inconsistency, I'm not the highest on McCain just because of his like well-rounded impact, smaller guard, right? I worry about him defensively, but he brings me some poise, he brings me a little bit of playmaking, and he brings me shooting, which the Lakers desperately, desperately need in that backcourt, and they need help there. So I'm not the biggest fan of McCain's game, but I think he works here in LA.
That's interesting. I think it is a good choice because I do think that McCain at least competes defensively, and that's what you ideally would like. You want a guard who can bring you the combination of some defensive grit and some offensive skill, so it's not either Reeves and D'Lo, two very offensively oriented guards, or one and then Vando or Cam Reddish, right, athletes who defend but have real offensive limitations. Gabe Vincent was sort of supposed to be the best balance of the two. McCain would be a good pick in that sense. I also think, though, The other spot that you're looking at is adding a second quality big so you don't ever have to worry about Jackson Hayes minutes. That's sort of where I'm leaning. I've seen a lot of people talking about Edey to the Lakers, and I can actually really see that. Now, I would not want to see AD and Edey out on the floor together much because I think that LA's offense thrived last year because of how much skill they had out there, because of the fact that they really embraced five out, and it made them one of the best offenses in the league down the stretch. But when it comes to the non-AD minutes, like, he's going to be a problem for teams to guard. He's especially going to be a problem for second units to guard, and he's going to maintain at least that rim protection and that rebounding on the inside. The other alternative to have a guy who is more palatable playing alongside AD would be Kel Ware, because you're bringing floor spacing, you're bringing a bit mobility and athleticism compared to Edey. And I will say one last time, Tristan da Silva would be sick here.
Dude, I love the Edey pick, actually. Think about this, too. I know you're not talking about them playing together. In a hypothetical matchup in the playoffs against Denver or Minnesota, you can actually match their size with AD and Edey and LeBron. And again, it's not going to be pretty, but you match them physically. And then I'm not saying you have a Jokic stopper. You at least finally have someone that is physically big enough to match up with Jokic. So I think they need a guard desperately off the bench, but I actually think I like Edey more, and he is going to feast on second units, like you mentioned. Yeah. I'm going to flip my pick. I actually love Edey to the Lakers. I think that would be a dream fit.
You make a great point about at least the option to go with the two big looks, which can be legitimately pivotal. I think that we've seen them attempt to use the roamer strategy with AD when you're talking about the Hotch being asked to stay in front of Jokic. If it was Zach Edey, we're talking about 7'4", 300 pounds. That's a completely different dynamic. And then if you're not doing that look, as you wouldn't in most matchups, then you just play him a quality 15 minutes a game off the bench, and he's going to be super productive in those minutes. I think it's good value for Edey. Again, the fit is probably clunky enough with a lot of these lottery teams that they won't want to take him. This is a spot where I do think the fit makes sense, and he's a very high floor player for a team that is trying to win now. Okay, how about New Orleans at pick 21?
I think New Orleans should take a 5.
Yep.
You saw in the playoffs, Valanciunas sometimes couldn't get burned. You're running Larry Nance 5 minutes, so I'm not saying this is going to put, Valanciunas out of a job or anything, but you at least give...
Well, I think Valanciunas is out of a job in New Orleans.
Well, I'm saying if it gives you another option, right? If you want to bring him back, you can. You have the second unit guy. If not, you let him walk.
Larry Nance better.
Sadly. I think Missy is probably the guy. Maybe Filipowski. I say maybe Filipowski because you get a little bit of that floor spacing alongside Zion where, if you give him the rock, that's just a weapon, man, having a guy that can hit from out there. You saw it, right? And lineups with Larry Nance. Nance can stretch the floor. So I would take Missy if you want the rim protection. I would say take Missy if you want the shooting and the skill. And one thing you didn't mention with Filipowski, dude, some of the post fades that he shoots, Filipowski really looks like a guard. He has got guard skill. Man. And, it just really, his fadeaway is beautiful. It looks, it's a work of art. It's so pretty, it's disgusting. I would say Missy or Filipowski. I definitely think they need a 5 at this, at pick 21.
Unequivocally, they need a 5. And even though I said Larry Nance better, I think he was legitimately better than Valanciunas, at least for a lot of stretches of that series against OKC. It's also Larry Nance can't be your 5. He's too small. You can't do that. That's untenable going forward. So I think that Missy is my favorite here as well. This is Yves Missy out of Baylor, for those who don't know. Filipowski I really do like. And it's difficult because, you don't want a 5 who is limited offensively. But to me, it's more important that you get a guy who can really, really anchor that defense and then who can also bring you some real vertical spacing. And I think that Missy is a guy who can guard on the perimeter relatively well too, which is really big, maintaining that switchability. Because the best version of the Pelicans to me is Zion, a lead guard, and then two awesome defensively oriented wings who can knock down shots, which they already have with Herb and Trey, and then like an athletic defensive vertical spacing big. I think that that's Missy, and so that to me would be the best pick. Also, though, if Edey is still on the board and if Missy's off, then I would definitely consider him. I just think it's kind of got to be 5 or bust for New Orleans. Okay, how about the Bucks at pick 23, Logan?
I've got two guys highlighted. The first is Kevin McCullough out of Kansas. I think McCullough is going to be a really good defender immediately. I've got questions about his offensive game, but he's got flashes there of playmaking, of shooting, of scoring. It's a little raw, but he's a really good defender, and the Bucks desperately need perimeter defense. So I think McCullough is the better defender of these two guys, who's a little bit more limited offensively. If you want the more offensively inclined guy with a little bit more questions defensively, I would take Jacoby Walter. But I think a defensive-oriented wing is probably where the Bucks need to go. And I think I'm leaning McCullough just because I think McCullough's the better defender.
So I think that definitely a versatile, defensively oriented wing would be a very good pickup, but also somebody who brings you some offensive punch. So we're not talking about like an Andre Jackson Jr. level of offense. McCullough, I think this would probably be a reach. I'm going to shout out my boy Jalen Tyson here. I think that, again, you're getting a dude who's going to defend well then, but is going to rebound even better than his size would indicate, and is going to bring you just a lot of offensive versatility. I could see the alternate route of we want a younger, more athletic 5 who doesn't limit us defensively like Brook Lopez, just in terms of his inability to guard in space. And that's where, if Missy was still on the board, he'd be interesting. I would say Kel'el Ware, because then you also get the floor spacing, but I really think there's no chance that Kel'el Ware falls all the way to 23. So my favorite route would probably be get a quality wing. Jalen Tyson to me is probably the best guy, the guy who I'm most comfortable picking, who will still be available in this range. Okay, how about the Knicks, Logan, who pick back-to-back at 24 and 25?
The Knicks don't have a ton of needs to me, man. So I'm conflicted. Like, do you just go with a couple of young guys, maybe projects? Like, do you just go with some like scorers? I think Keyshawn George could work here in New York. A guy with a little bit of a scoring punch. I also like the overseas guy, Nikola Jurisic. I've also heard he's second round, so maybe you're reaching a little bit here. George I like. I think you go for a little bit of more some scoring or playmaking punch. And maybe Reeves. Again, I think Antonio Reeves may be a little bit of a reach here. He's consensus second round, but I like what he can do off ball, and I think he could complement a Deuce McBride off the bench. I think he could complement Jalen Brunson within the flow of the offense. And then identity-wise, he's limited offensively, but I think he works with the defensive culture. I think Kevin McCullough could work here, just in terms of what he brings defensively with what the Knicks want to do. So the Knicks are a big question mark, man. I don't know what you do because the majority of their roster's filled out. OG Anunoby is a free agent. I think the Knicks desperately need to bring him back, but the Knicks don't really scream like they have a bunch of needs to me. So they're two very intriguing picks at the late first round.
Yeah, they are. Obviously, this is a really good basketball team, and part of what makes them so great is their depth. So there's a couple of archetypes that I'm kind of looking at. I think adding a bigger wing would be good for them, because even though all of these dudes who play for New York play bigger than their size, like especially Josh Hart, right? The fact that you can throw out a 6'4", 6'5" guy as your 3 and he's like going to be an awesome rebounder, like that's a special weapon. And also I think that some of their size stuff felt different in the playoffs because they didn't have Julius Randle and then they didn't have Mitchell Robinson. But I just think generally that's an archetype that's pretty valuable for any team, and it makes you less dependent on like playing Deuce and Dante, all these guys, like just a lot of guards, big minutes. So I'll shout out Jalen Tyson again, because he is bigger and he brings that two-way value and that versatility. I also think they are in a position where like they do have so many quality basketball players maybe you take a flyer on like Ryan Dunn, who is just an insane defender, like arguably the best defensive player in this class out of UVA, Logan, as you know. And then you're getting size, you're getting length, like you're getting everything from this dude. Elite perimeter defense, insane secondary rim protection for a wing. I just really worry about his offense. Like, this dude is a terrible three-point shooter, a terrible free throw shooter. We're talking about like a you don't guard him kind of guy. So this is probably too high. I probably wouldn't take him in the first round because of that, because I'm not really optimistic about him improving there. But if there's a spot for him, New York could make sense. I'm going to say I prefer Jalen Tyson, even though I also like him for the Bucks. Whatever. Nobody's actually picking these guys yet. And then the pick that I really like for them, because they do have these two back-to-back, is Filipowski. Because if Hartenstein walks, which he very likely may, just because can't pay everybody, and I think that guy's going to get a bag. To me, Filipowski allows you to maintain size at the 5, which is really important, having both him and Mitchell Robinson who you can play, and versatility as well, because, again, I don't think that Filipowski is necessarily best at a 5. I'd like to see him as a 4, but I think that he can play the 5, and then you're getting a more offensively oriented look with him out there. They're going to have to fill that gap in one way or another, and I think some of the more conventional, straight-up athletic 5s who we've been talking about, Kello Ware, Missy, will probably be off the board by this point. And I really like Filipowski's game offensively. I think that'd be a good pickup for them. I think he's very ready to contribute now as well. Okay, how about the Nuggets at pick 28, Logan?
The Nuggets, to me, have two clear needs that they should address, and that's bench point guard and then bench center. I'm stuck between a few prospects. I liked your boy Kolek here to Denver. I like UConn's Cam Spencer a little bit. I also like Filipowski here too, like in non-Jokic minutes and how skilled he is. I think I prefer point guard. I think I'm going to go with your boy Kolek here, man. I just think he brings a really high floor. He's probably a little more consistent. I'm just wondering, like, do you think he can be better than like a Reggie Jackson immediately?
Yeah, I think so. He's much steadier. You trust the process much more. That's one of the most frustrating things about Reggie, just taking bad shots. I think Kolek's a much smarter, much more complete, consistent offensive player.
Because I think he's more. I think he may be more skilled, more athletic, right? But it's like, would I rather have that or a steadying presence? The Denver Nuggets have not really had anything steady about their bench over the last couple years, and so those are the two primary positions. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with your boy Kolek here.
It's a good pick. I like it a lot. I don't know if Kolek will still be on the board, but I don't think it's totally out of the question. It seems that it's very likely that the Nuggets take Deron Holmes here, and that is filling in the other archetype that you mentioned that to me is probably even more important, just like having any 5 who you trust to play in non-Jokic minutes, and Deron Holmes is a good athlete. He had a legitimately awesome three-point shooting season this past year, and there's some questions about how sustainable that is because he wasn't a great free throw shooter and he hadn't really shown that floor spacing before this year, but I'm pretty confident in it, and this is a guy who can like attack mismatches out of the post, even has some ball handling, playmaking chops, and then is a really good shot blocker. So he's a bit undersized for a 5, but like if he's your backup 5, I think you're getting a lot of good stuff out of him that Denver has desperately needed because the non-Jokic minutes have been a disaster for a long time, and that is largely about the offensive side of the ball, not having anybody who can come close to replicating his value. It's also largely about the defensive ineptitude of a lot of the options that they've trotted out there. I think that Holmes would be an improvement. Okay, and finally, Logan, the Celtics at pick 30. Who's your favorite choice for them?
I'm going to shout the guy you just did. I think they should go with a big man. I would either take Deron Holmes or Kyle Filipowski if he's still available. The main reason is just depth concerns, right? I like Luke Cornett as much as the next guy, but, is the guy playable in playoff settings? Not many. He can eat against the Cavs in stretches, sure, but Al Horford's getting older. Xavier Tillman's a little undersized, a little limited, right? I think Filipowski brings a little more skill, and then Holmes brings, again, a little undersized, but he's athletic, has some skill to him as well. It's really just that he's undersized, but he's pretty versatile. I just think you need depth there, man. You don't know if the fall off is coming for Horford. I hope it doesn't. Porzingis with his injury concerns, I just think there's a lot of questions there with the big man spot, and I think they should address it here by getting a young guy.
Totally agreed. I would take Filipowski if he were still here, but I think that big man is the position to address because obviously there's not much that Boston needs, but if there is anything, it's a legit third big, especially one who could play both the 4 and the 5. So if it's okay, we want to go Filipowski and Horford, look, great, that's viable. We want to go Filipowski and KP, great, that's viable. We're down one of them, probably KP. Okay, this guy can be our backup 5. I think that's the best option, and I think he's also just a good basketball player who, if he were to last until 30, would be, in my opinion, undervalued and pro-ready for a team who's really only interested, I would think, in pro-ready guys. All right, Logan, we're not getting out of here just yet because it seems that a lot of people want us to talk about this report that came out yesterday from Tom Haberstroh about the inflation of Michael Jordan's stock totals in his 1988 Defensive Player of the Year season. Really interesting, basically super intensive article, talks about first noticing a disparity in the home and away stock splits for MJ during his DPOY season, something like an 80% inflation, and it was not uncommon, especially at that time, to see some inflation in terms of home versus away stats, guys playing better, maybe being part of it, but also favorable home stat keepers. But you're talking normally about like maybe 20%. You're not talking about anything close to 80%. And then talked about diving into the film and seeing some instances in which things that clearly just were not actual steals that should have been attributed to MJ were attributed to MJ. So this kind of dominated the entire basketball sphere yesterday because it's the off season and people love doing revisionist MJ stuff. What was your reaction to all this?
I mean, like, people are just going to try to chop down, like, MJ at any given point. Look, man, it's not a good look, right? It sucks. I mean, now you have to kind of question a lot about basketball from back then. You have to question a lot about the validity of, Stockton's assist numbers and this and that. To me, it's like MJ still has a legitimate case, right? Like, even if it's a steal, a half a steal a game or whatnot, like, he's still got a case to win the award, right?
Well, it'd be more like if we're taking, let's say, okay, 80% home inflation, but if typical is about 20%, 60% inflation at home, so that's 30% of your overall stock production. So that would knock you down from something like 4.8 stocks per game to like 3.5. So it would knock off a little more than a stock a game in that one season, because that's the only season in which they found like an abnormal disparity.
Yeah, the guys I'd be really upset for are guys in that season that could have had a chance to win the award, like Hakeem Olajuwon or Patrick Ewing or Michael Cooper or Mark Eaton, right? Those are the guys that I would be really upset for. But, like, the thing that really pisses me off about this.
Bro almost got up out of his seat.
Dude, does it really
go fight somebody?
Does it really matter that much to Michael Jordan's legacy if he has a Defensive Player of the Year or not? Look, man, we all know MJ is one of the greatest defensive players ever. We all know that LeBron's one of the greatest defensive players ever. Like, what are we doing, man? Does it really matter that much to, like, his legacy? Damn, man, y'all just hate MJ, don't y'all? Y'all just want to... Damn, man, clean your mouth up when you're done with Bron, bro. Damn. Anything to discredit MJ, bro. Anything to... If you're going to go fight the battle, please go fight it for Michael Cooper. Please go fight it for Hakeem. Please go fight it for Patrick. Just don't go disparage MJ, right? Like, it upsets me greatly as a basketball fan that I am all about numbers, I am all about statistics, I am all about how we can use these numbers to measure players. And so it upsets me greatly that there may be inaccuracies with these numbers, right? It is frustrating. And so as a pure sports and basketball and stats fan, it makes me mad because that's what it's all about, man. We use these numbers with the film to put together our analytical arguments and make these cases. And so it frustrates me to no end that there may be faults in these numbers. But I'm just so tired of this debate, bro. And the fact that we frame it as MJ versus Jordan. Guys, y'all have been doing MJ versus Jordan for 15 years now, and we're going to be doing it for the next 25. Yeah, MJ versus Jordan. I'm sorry, bro. I've gotten so frustrated. I have confused MJ and LeBron.
It's okay, and you're sick.
Yeah, I'm tired of doing the MJ versus LeBron debates, dude, and painting it as, guys, would it really make that big of a difference to y'all if MJ had the DPOY or not? It doesn't really make that much of a difference in MJ's legacy if he has this award to me. MJ's a great defensive player. LeBron's a great defensive player. Damn, man. The thing that really pisses me off, Carson, is as a nerd, as a stats nerd, it really disappoints me that the numbers are off to this extent. And I think in the article, Carson, I don't think it was 80%. I don't know if you mean the overall differential. I think the discrepancy between home and away was like 182%. Like it was something ridiculous.
That means it's 80% inflation.
Oh,
because
okay.
It's 180% of the
that
production,
makes sense.
Which is 100% of itself.
That's ridiculous. I mean, that is a crazy discrepancy.
Yeah, it is. And it's absolutely disappointing. And first of all, I thought this was a really interesting report, and I thought that it was thorough, and I thought that it was accurate, but I think that you hit on the key point. You know what I'm not moved by in the GOAT debate? Michael Jordan's 1988 Defensive Player of the Year award, or the difference between him averaging 4.8 stocks per game and 3.5 stocks per game in the 1988 season. Like, if we want to talk about this, you can take, in your own opinion, his 1988 Defensive Player of the Year award away. In fact, I would say that Hakeem probably deserved it. I think Mark Eaton made a very strong case. But it's like you said, that doesn't change who he was as a defensive player. And with all of this stuff, and this is something that I tried to make very clear in our top 25 players of all time discussion last year, accolades just really don't move me much, right? Kobe is 12 times all defense. That's just obviously ridiculous considering who he was consistently as a defensive player. We see voters get MVPs wrong with some frequency, decisions that we disagree with on an individual level. So a player's greatness is not the total of their accolades. And not to me. And I understand if you are in the trenches of these debates and you are seeing the nasty graphics where they are putting up all-star MVPs and they're comparing every single award, every single thing you have on the shelf, then I could see how you have been trained or influenced to think in this way. That's just not how I talk about basketball. That's not how I view these things. I view these guys in terms of how do I assess their caliber as individual basketball players, and this just doesn't change that really whatsoever. I mean, I've watched a lot of Michael Jordan. That's how I form my opinion, and of course, the numbers are a big part of that as well. But like we're talking about one season where there's a discrepancy in one category. So this being the story of the day is silly to me, and like I'm happy that this came out because it's information, it's informative, but the response to it is where things go just completely out of control, and of course it turns into Michael Jordan slander. And I understand that there's a lot of animosity in this debate. I just don't think that like the misuse of information, the manipulation to promote whatever agendas people have is good in any case, right? I think it sucks when people say that players used to be better. I think it sucks when people diminish every generation that came before this one because the game hadn't evolved to the place that it is at today. Like, that's how I feel about all this discourse. It's so overwhelmingly negative and biased, and confirmation bias is such a huge part of it. Everybody is just waiting on the opportunity to jump on the opposing camp, and that's really not how it should be. Like, I can't emphasize enough how much I don't care who your GOAT is. And I can't emphasize enough how close I think it is between these two basketball players. And I think some of it just comes down to your fundamental beliefs about the game, about team building. How do you value longevity versus peak? How do you value floor raising, which would lean LeBron, versus ceiling raising, which would lean MJ? Like, I'm not going to go into the whole discussion right now, but that's what interests me. It's the basketball of it, because these are two all-time great basketball players, and if you think that they are not incredibly close when you consider their basketball resumes and the level they were at within the context of their era, which is the only way to evaluate this stuff, then I just think you're someone who probably isn't worth listening to. If you don't think it's close in either direction, like that's kind of the only opinion that will actually make me say, okay, I don't really value your opinion, because it very obviously is very close. I understand that to some people, it's like MJ has been presented as this sort of mythological creature. And I think that's where some of like the watching the 91 finals leading to like some sort of collective revelation among people being like, oh my God, these guys missed open jumpers. They weren't all constantly clamping defensively. That seemed to a lot of people to be like the end for MJ. And it's like, no, if you have an informed opinion, you understand that basketball is a lot better than it was 35 years ago, 30 years ago. That's not how we evaluate these players. MJ's not a mythological creature. He has like one of the all-time great hype machines behind him. So I understand why people think that way. Like, he has been presented by many as infallible, as a god, as untouchable until the end of time. Nobody will ever be MJ because of his aura, because of his mentality, because 6 rings in 6 years, 6-0 in the finals, all that shit that I don't care about, that I don't value in this discussion. I get if that pisses you off, but he's not a mythological creature. You're right to deconstruct that. Just like LeBron is not a mythological creature, but they are both amazing, amazing basketball players, and we are much better served by appreciating that. My frustration is not whatsoever with the report here. My frustration is with the response to the report and really just the place that basketball discourse is at. Because, again, I think the pure basketball debate of MJ versus LeBron is fascinating. But when it comes to everything on the periphery of that, like you, Logan, I am GOAT debated out, man. Like, this just cannot be what we rely on for what? The coming decades? Michael Jordan last played basketball for the Chicago Bulls in 1998. This is what we're going to do forever, man. Like, that's just not fun to me. And it's not just MJ versus LeBron. It's all this hyperfixation on superstars, great players, and stuff that doesn't have to do with what they're doing on the basketball court, right? Stephen A. talking about LeBron's podcast, how it's not good for him. First Take doing a segment on Bron unfollowing Kendrick Perk. Like, I want to be clear, I don't watch any of this shit, but I see it. I see a screenshot of it, and I'm like, that sucks. Our discourse can't be on the flip side of that. MJ stands every single time they see a mention of LeBron responding with 18 spreadsheets of why they think that Michael Jordan is the GOAT. It can't be Kobe stans talking every day about the fact that he woke up with a different mentality than everybody else is the reason he's the best basketball player ever. Like, this culture of discourse, and particularly the stan culture, is so broken. It is so distorted from what we are meant to be doing. I saw a Lonzo Muse versus Giddey Muse conversation today, Logan. I saw 2 buffoons with Lonzo Ball and Josh Giddey as the entire premise of their social media presences going at it with each other. What are we doing? We are supposed to love this sport. You are supposed to love a team. Okay, I'm good with that. You want to get tribal with your team, go to bat for them, live and die for them. Hey, you're going to have a biased opinion, but I understand that that is steeped in the tradition of sports. Why is it all about dying for these individual players? I just don't get it. And I think that really discourse is in a toxic place, and I don't even know how we can save it. It's up to you and me, Logan. We have to be the ones to save it. But it's just really hard to have honest conversations about anything in the sports world. And that bums me out.
I mean, everything's black and white. Everything is, I'm right or, you're wrong. We're so closed-minded. That's what's frustrating, man. It's like we're not even open to, like, listening to, or not even, like, no, people want to argue. People want to debate. That's all that people do on the internet. But it's like we don't even want to. That's a sad reality, Carson. Is that a lot of people don't actually like the sport, man. They don't like they just enjoy, it seems like, spewing nonsense about an athlete that they like. And every bit of information that comes out, you either completely disregard it or it reinforces your preconceived notion that you already have, right? Braun Sexuals went crazy with this one. I'm sure got them all horned up, man. It got them all ready to go. You know, this was like their holy grail, man. Like, I bet they started salivating when this report came out, man. This was everything that they've ever wanted. And really, it makes marginal difference, man. I'm tired, boss. I'm tired, boss. I'm tired of having the same old conversation.
Tired. Yeah, and I understand that there's always the perspective of like, those guys do it. Those guys say dumbass shit. We are therefore entitled to say dumbass shit. And to quote an ancient proverb, Logan, two wrongs don't make a right. And I think that, listen, some people are just having fun with this. Matt Sponhour immediately went to text me afterwards. He said some nonsense, that bronze sexual. And that's fine. I mean, obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't mean to make this like the point at which NBA discourse has gone too far, because again, I do think that this was a valuable report, and I understand people having their issues with how MJ is lionized as an untouchable god. I get that, because there is going to be a better basketball player than Michael Jordan if there hasn't been already. If you think LeBron already has achieved that, I have no problem with that. But what is undeniable is that there will be a day, and that day may be very soon, where it's just like indisputable, right? We have a new undeniable universal GOAT. That's going to happen. And any sort of attachment to the level that doesn't allow you to be rational in any conversation, that to me is just kind of annoying. And unfortunately, that feels like where like 95% of sports discourse takes place. And that's not to say that like I don't have players who I love, right? Like I think very obviously I love Nikola Jokic. I love Steph Curry. I love a lot of basketball players. I don't think there's any basketball players who I hate. So I really, really try to be objective in everything that we're saying is my key point. And I really try to not come into a conversation and evaluation with a preset opinion and always be fluid. And I don't think that I'm perfect there. I'm not trying to say, you know, that we are the holy saints of objective discourse, but it gets bad out there. And that's just the state of most of this stuff.
Well, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but also that's what makes this so frustrating is that the mainstream sports media outlets too could do such a good job of helping make basketball discourse smarter, and instead they perpetuate the stupidity. They boil these arguments down into you take one side, I'll take the other. And we could get better, man. We could be smarter about this. It just I want us to think more critically about ball, man.
Real. Well, on that note, hope that you guys have enjoyed us ranting at you about NBA discourse for the last 20 minutes. We covered a lot today, and we didn't even cover Malik Monk's extension. 4 years, $78 million. The Sacramento Kings keep him. Perhaps the best NBA player. I'm talking about players I love. Malik Monk, top of the list. Malik Ahmad Monk, the god of dunk. Respect him. Very happy that he got his bag. And I guess I'm happy that he stayed in Sacramento. I was kind of interested in seeing if he could go somewhere else. But I think he loves De'Aaron Fox. And that's nice. Having two buddies together. Oh, that's just nice. That warms the heart. All right, guys. If you want to see two buddies do a podcast, then you know where to find us. YouTube. All of our shows are here. And we got some video essay content. We'll be doing a bunch of stuff throughout the summer on the show. Lists. Trivia. Oh, we've got some good guests coming up, folks. Oh, I'm very excited. That will be a weekly thing going forward. Draft content. We're going to be doing a live show Wednesday as the draft goes on, so stay tuned in for that on our YouTube channel. And then after that, free agency. So you can stay tuned into all this stuff, following us across social, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at @nerd_sesh. You can see all of our trivia content there, clips from the show. And if you want to join our Discord, you can do so. Wow, dude, my voice is going. Discord at the link that is in the link tree across our social media bios. And you can check out our merch at thevolume.com to wear that sweet, sweet hat that Logan is wearing on his sweet little glowing, bald, gorgeous, lovely head. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Campton.
And this was NerdSesh.